Iran claims their missile inventory is at 120% and their readiness is at 1,000%. But if that's true, why is the U.S. Navy currently disabling their tankers with precision strikes while Iranian ships can't even move? This morning, the strategic reality of the Middle East shifted once again as F-18 Super Hornets from the U.S. aircraft carriers took out 3 major vessels violating the blockade, including the Sea Star 3 and the Civita. While Iranian politicians in Tehran claim they are winning the war and that their maximum pressure is working, the reality on the water tells a far more devastating story. A massive 45-kilometer oil slick spreading through the Gulf, 70 tankers trapped in port, and a staggering $13 billion hole in Iran's revenue. Today, we're looking at the raw data the mainstream media is missing. We'll show you why the U.S. just approved $25 billion in emergency weapons for the Gulf, and how Iran's latest move against a Chinese tanker might have just cost them their last major ally. We are diving deep into the satellite imagery, the tactical maneuvers, and the economic collapse of a regime with its back against the wall. Let's get into it. This is military sense. The war is officially restarting in the Strait of Hormuz, and the intensity of the opening salvos has caught many by surprise. Just this morning, Iranian naval assets attempted a desperate, coordinated break of the U.S. blockade. It was a high-stakes gamble that failed spectacularly. U.S. naval forces didn't just intercept these ships. They utilized precision-guided munitions to neutralize them to the point where they can no longer even maneuver, effectively turning them into floating obstacles. This morning's failure comes on the heels of a massive, multi-wave air campaign yesterday, where the U.S. military wiped out Iranian missile and drone depots situated along the rugged coast of the strait. These weren't just storage facilities. They were active launch sites equipped with coastal defense cruise missiles and advanced UAV platforms. Satellite imagery confirms that key strategic locations, including the primary naval hub at Bandar Abbas and the surveillance outposts on Keshem Island, were hit with surgical precision. These strikes were not unprovoked. They were a direct response to Iranian forces launching a barrage of missiles and drones at U.S. warships that were operating in international waters near the strait. The U.S. Navy reported that their destroyers, including the Arleigh Burke-class ships, had to engage multiple incoming threats simultaneously. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has made the U.S. position crystal clear in his latest briefing. If you fire at a U.S. Navy ship, you are going to get blown up. There are no more red lines to negotiate. The line has been crossed and the response is immediate, kinetic, and devastating. The U.S. military's approach has shifted from deterrence to active degradation. By targeting the smokestacks and propulsion systems of non-compliant tankers, the U.S. is sending a message to every shipping company in the region: the blockade is absolute. The footage released by Central Command shows F-18 Super Hornets firing precision munitions into the engine rooms of vessels like the Hassana, ensuring they cannot reach Iranian ports to offload or load oil. This tactical choice, disabling rather than sinking, is a calculated move to prevent a massive environmental catastrophe while still achieving the strategic goal of economic strangulation. However, as we will see later, the Iranians themselves may be the ones causing the very environmental damage the U.S. is trying to avoid. The tactical situation for Iran is becoming increasingly dire, and the gap between their propaganda and the economic reality is widening by the hour. While their foreign ministry releases statements claiming their missile capacity is higher than when the war started, citing a figure of 120%, their actions on the water suggest a regime in deep distress. If their capacity is truly at 120%, why were they saving these missiles while their naval assets were being systematically dismantled? Why was Iran slowing down on missile launches at the end of the previous phase of the war if their inventory was supposedly increasing every single day? The answer isn't found in their press releases, it's found in the numbers. Currently, more than 70 tankers are being prevented from entering or leaving Iranian ports by U.S. and allied forces. These commercial ships have the capacity to transport over 166 million barrels of Iranian oil, worth an estimated $13 billion at current market prices. For a country already reeling from years of sanctions and the costs of a multi-front war, this is a death blow. Iran is missing out on the very revenue it needs to pay its soldiers, maintain its hardware, and keep its domestic economy from total collapse. Desperation is setting in, and we are seeing evidence of it in the most literal sense. A massive 45-kilometer oil slick detected near Iran's Kar Island export hub. Satellite imagery reviewed by Reuters and independent analysts shows a slick covering roughly 45 kilometers west of the terminal that handles about 90% of Iranian oil exports. While the exact cause remains unconfirmed, the timing is suspicious. Is this a result of a mistake during a desperate ship-to-ship transfer under the cover of darkness? Or is it a deliberate strategy by the Iranian regime to dump oil into the ocean to create an environmental shield or to dispel the pressure of overflowing storage tanks? Iran is getting very close to running out of storage space, and they need a way to let go of that pressure. If they have to shut off their oil fields because they have nowhere to put the crude, it could take years to bring those fields back online. This environmental disaster may be their way of avoiding a permanent shutdown of their primary economic engine. Perhaps the most dangerous escalation, however, is the diplomatic one. In a move that has shocked international observers and likely sealed Iran's fate, the Iranian Navy seized a Chinese-owned oil tanker, the Ocean Koi, in the Sea of Oman. This vessel was actually carrying Iranian oil, but it is owned by a Shanghai-based company, Ocean Kudo, which had been previously sanctioned by the United States. By seizing a ship owned by their most powerful remaining ally, Iran is attempting to flex fake muscles to signal to the world that they control the Strait of Hormuz. They are claiming sovereignty over an international waterway, a move that Secretary Rubio and other global leaders have called a fundamental violation of international law. The Chinese government is reportedly furious. Beijing has issued a stern warning, stating that the escalating hostilities between Iran and the United States are disrupting one of the most critical maritime corridors for their energy security. China is deeply concerned that a large number of vessels and crew members, including Chinese nationals, have been stranded in the strait for months. By seizing the Ocean Koi, Iran isn't just acting tough against the U.S., they are biting the hand that feeds them. This move seems designed to send a message to other tankers and cargo ships: don't go through the Strait of Hormuz, otherwise we can take over your ship just like we did with this one. It is the Iranian way of telling everyone that the strait is under their sovereignty, when in reality, no other country in the world is willing to accept that claim. This sovereignty standoff is the core of the current crisis. If the world allows Iran to claim an international strait as their own territory, it sets a precedent that could destabilize maritime corridors from the South China Sea to the English Channel. Secretary Rubio has questioned why anyone would be supportive of such a claim, noting that if Iran is allowed to do this, 10 other countries will start doing the same thing in international waterways near their own borders. The U.S. is not just fighting for its own interests, it is fighting to maintain the very concept of international waters and free navigation. To counter this growing threat and ensure that Iran cannot break the blockade through sheer volume of attacks, the U.S. has just approved a staggering $25 billion in emergency weapon sales to its Gulf allies. This is a massive increase from the initially disclosed $8.6 billion package. The recipients include Bahrain, Israel, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE. The centerpiece of this package is a large number of Patriot missile interceptors, designed to defend against the very drones and ballistic missiles that Iran claims to have in abundance. The demand for these systems is so high that it currently exceeds the actual supply, and delivery could take years due to limited U.S. production capacity. However, the immediate impact is psychological and strategic. It signals to Tehran that the U.S. is committed to a long-term presence and that its allies will not be left defenseless. The UAE air defenses have already proven their worth, intercepting roughly 500 ballistic missiles, 30 cruise missiles, and over 2,200 drones since the conflict began. While these interceptions have resulted in more than 200 injuries due to falling debris, the alternative, direct hits on civilian infrastructure and oil facilities, would have been catastrophic. The U.S. air defenses are holding up really good, and every country in the Gulf is now buying these systems at a record pace. This regional rearmament is creating a steel dome over the Gulf, making Iran's missile threats less and less effective as a tool of coercion. As the U.S. blockade continues to choke off Iran's revenue, the regime's ability to replace the missiles and drones it fires is being systematically eroded. We are witnessing a war of attrition where the U.S. and its allies have the deep pockets and the technological edge, while Iran is running on fumes and empty promises. The internal collapse and the path forward. As we look at the totality of the situation, the disabled tankers, the $13 billion in lost revenue, the environmental disasters, and the diplomatic isolation, it becomes clear that the Iranian regime is facing an existential crisis. Their internal statements of winning the war are increasingly disconnected from the tactical reality on the ground. Iranian politicians are crying that the U.S. is trying to derail negotiations, but it was Iran that chose to launch missiles at U.S. warships during a ceasefire. It was Iran that chose to seize a Chinese tanker. It was Iran that chose to pollute the very waters they claim to own. The U.S. blockade is not just a military operation, it is a surgical economic intervention. By preventing the flow of oil and disabling the vessels that attempt to bypass the rules, the U.S. is forcing a choice upon the leadership in Tehran: negotiate in good faith or face total economic and military collapse. The one-page deal we discussed in our previous video remains on the table, but with every passing hour and every new provocation, the terms of that deal are likely to become harsher. The world is watching the Strait of Hormuz with bated breath. The next few days will be critical. Will Iran double down on its sovereignty claims and risk a direct, full-scale confrontation with the U.S. Navy? Or will the pressure of the $13 billion standoff and the anger of their Chinese allies finally force them to the table? One thing is certain: The US military has the hardware, the data, and the resolve to maintain this blockade for as long as it takes. The situation in the Strait of Hormuz is a masterclass in modern naval warfare and economic statecraft. Iran's attempt to seize control of an international waterway and their willingness to alienate even their closest allies like China shows a regime that is fundamentally cornered and operating without a viable long-term strategy. The US blockade is holding, the precision strikes are hitting their marks with devastating accuracy, and the economic cost for Tehran is becoming an insurmountable mountain of debt and lost opportunity. But as the pressure mounts, the risk of a desperate final escalation grows. A cornered animal is at its most dangerous, and the Iranian regime has shown time and again that they are willing to burn the region to stay in power. We will continue to track the satellite data, the naval movements in the Gulf, and the diplomatic shifts in Washington and Beijing to bring you the tactical truth that the mainstream media often overlooks. If you found this in-depth analysis valuable and want to stay informed on the military strategies shaping our global future, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and ring the notification bell. Your support allows us to keep digging into the data and bringing you the facts from the front lines. What do you think is Iran's next move? Will they back down, or is a larger conflict inevitable? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. This is Military Sense.